The terminal went dark, alarms started ringing, and a voice was asking, right now, to talk to someone called Reaper. Nobody moved. Nobody understood. Except her, the quiet woman nobody had noticed, sitting alone with a coffee, who suddenly realized that name belonged to a life she thought she'd left behind forever. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The food court at Denver International smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon pretzels, and nobody looked twice at the woman in seat 14 by the window. She wore a faded olive jacket 2 sizes too big, hair pulled back in a plain elastic, a paperback novel open on her lap that she wasn't reading. To the barista who'd made her coffee, she was just another traveler killing time between connections, quiet, unremarkable, gone the second she paid. To the businessman arguing with his phone at the next table, she didn't exist at all. That was exactly how Mara Voss liked it. 3 years ago she'd been Lieutenant Commander Mara Voss, call sign Reaper, the Navy's youngest qualified EA-18G Growler electronic warfare officer, the woman who'd flown escort on missions that never made it into any after-action report because, officially, they never happened. 3 years ago she'd had a security clearance that outranked most generals and a service record that had been quietly buried under so many black classifications it might as well not exist. Now she sold real estate in Boulder. She drove a Honda. She hadn't touched a flight stick in 11 months, and some mornings she almost believed that was fine. She sipped her coffee and turned a page she wasn't reading. Then the screens went black. It happened all at once, every departure board in the terminal, every gate monitor, every ad screen bolted above the shops, flickering out in perfect unison and replacing themselves with a single scrolling line of white text on black. A murmur rippled through the food court. People looked up from their phones, their sandwiches, their arguments. Mara didn't move. Her stomach had already gone tight and cold, the way it used to before a mission brief, the way a body remembers a language the mind has tried to forget. It's nothing, she told herself. Coincidence. Some drill. Then the intercom crackled, not the smooth, pre-recorded gate change voice everyone in the terminal had heard 100 times, but something raw. A live line, breathing on the other end before it spoke. This is Colonel Diane Farrow, United States Space Force, broadcasting under National Security Override Authority. This message is being transmitted to every airport, transit hub, and public frequency within a 200-mile radius of Denver. Silence spread through the food court like spilled water. Even the businessman had lowered his phone. We are attempting to make contact with an individual believed to be traveling through this facility. If you are listening, and you know this name, respond now. A pause. 2 seconds. 3. Reaper. The paperback slid off Mara's lap and hit the tile floor with a soft slap that, to her, sounded like a gunshot. Every head in the food court turned, not toward her, nobody knew who she was, nobody could, but toward each other, confused, searching for the joke, the explanation, the person this word might belong to. A teenager laughed nervously. Reaper? Like, is that a code name? Is this a movie thing? Someone else was already filming the dead screens on their phone. Mara sat frozen for exactly as long as her training allowed, which was not long at all. She stood, left the coffee, left the book on the floor, and walked, not ran, running drew eyes, walking with purpose did not, toward the unmarked door beside the TSA checkpoint that said Airport Operations, authorized personnel only. The man behind the desk was younger than her, some duty operations supervisor named Castillo who clearly thought this was the worst shift of his career, and he was halfway out of his chair when she came through the door without knocking. Ma'am, you can't. She had her credentials out before he finished the sentence. Not a driver's license. A slim black wallet she hadn't opened in 11 months, the leather still stiff, containing a card with a gold seal and a red diagonal stripe that made Castillo's mouth close mid-word. I need a secure line, Mara said. Her voice didn't shake. It surprised her, a little, how easily the old register came back, flat, clipped, allergic to wasted syllables. Now. Castillo didn't argue. He pointed to a red phone bolted to the wall behind his desk, the kind of thing that looked like a prop until you actually needed it. She picked it up and dialed a number from memory, 13 digits, a number she'd told herself she'd forgotten. It connected on the second ring. "This is Pharaoh." The colonel's voice was tight, controlled, but underneath it Mara could hear something close to relief. "Voss. Thank God. Are you secure?" "I'm secure. You just broadcast my call sign over an open civilian PA system in a federal airport, Colonel. That's not standard protocol for anything. Talk to me." "I know what I did. I'll answer for it later. Right now I need you to listen." A burst of noise behind Pharaoh's voice, radar operators, raised voices, the controlled chaos of a room running out of good options. 40 minutes ago we lost positive control of Vantage 9. Mara's blood went cold in a completely different way. Vantage 9 wasn't a plane, and it wasn't a drone in the sense that people pictured drones. Vantage 9 was a classified orbital defense platform, a directed energy weapons satellite, part of a program so compartmentalized that fewer than 40 people alive were cleared to know its full designation. Mara had flown 2 of the 3 test missions that had validated its targeting software, back when she still had a call sign and a cockpit. Lost control how? Someone got into the ground station at Schriever and pushed an unauthorized command sequence before our people could lock them out. The platform's weapons array is active. It's currently tracking a target. What target? Pharaoh hesitated, and that hesitation told Mara everything before the words came. You. The word landed somewhere behind Mara's sternum and stayed there. Say that again. The intrusion originated from inside our own network, Voss. Whoever did this had targeting authority, which means it's someone from the program. Someone who knew Vantage 9's capabilities, knew the software, and knew your movements well enough to slave the platform's tracking system to your personal devices. We think they've been watching you for weeks. That's not possible. I'm retired. I sell condos, Colonel. I know. And I know how insane this sounds. But 40 minutes ago that satellite locked a directed energy weapon onto a 5-meter radius around Denver International Airport, and it has been tracking your phone's GPS signal ever since you landed. Outside the small office, through the glass wall, Mara could see the concourse, hundreds of people, oblivious, scrolling their phones, buying pretzels, herding children toward gates, standing directly beneath a weapon capable of turning a car to slag in under a second. Why hasn't it fired? Because whoever hijacked it wants something first. We're being hailed on a classified frequency. The transmission has one demand. Pharaoh's voice dropped, and for the first time Mara heard something in it that sounded almost like grief. They want to talk to Reaper. Only Reaper. And Voss, the voice print on the transmission is a match. A match to who? Captain Elias Cho. Mara's hand tightened so hard around the phone receiver that her knuckles went white. Cho is dead, she said. I identified his remains myself. 18 months ago, over the Aleutians. I watched the search and rescue report. I know what the report says, Pharaoh said quietly. I need you to come to Schriever anyway. There was no fighter jet waiting this time, no cinematic Blackhawk tearing across the tarmac, no crew chief throwing a duffel bag into her arms. Instead there was a black SUV with government plates idling at the curb outside baggage claim, driven by a stone-faced Space Force officer who didn't say a word the entire 90-minute drive south to Colorado Springs, and Mara spent every mile of it staring out the window at a sky she used to own and now only feared. Schriever Space Force Base looked the way it always had, low buildings, radar domes, a compound so ordinary from the outside that you'd never guess it was where America watched the edges of orbit for things that could end cities. They walked her through 3 checkpoints, past armed guards whose eyes flicked toward her ID and then away, and into a windowless operations center where 40 screens glowed with tracking data and 40 faces looked up at her with a mixture of hope and suspicion she recognized from every high-stakes room she'd ever walked into. Colonel Farrow met her at the door. She was shorter than Mara expected, silver-haired, with the exhausted eyes of someone who hadn't slept in longer than the 40 minutes since this began. "He's still holding position," Farrow said without preamble, walking her toward the main display. A red icon hovered over a stylized map of Colorado's Front Range, a thin targeting line drawn straight down to a blinking dot labeled DIA, the airport Mara had walked out of an hour ago, where thousands of people were still boarding flights, buying coffee, living lives that had no idea how close they'd come to catastrophe. "He hasn't fired. He hasn't moved. He's just waiting." "Patch me through," Mara said. Farrow nodded to a technician, who typed a rapid sequence and gestured to a headset on the console. Mara put it on. The room went quiet around her, 40 operators holding their breath. "This is Reaper," she said. "I'm here." Static. Long enough that she thought the line had failed. Then, a voice she had buried, a voice she had cried over at a funeral with an empty casket, came through the headset, rough and tired and unmistakably, impossibly alive. "You cut your hair," Elias Cho said. Something broke loose in Mara's chest, grief and fury and disbelief all detonating at once. "Eli. They told me you were dead. I stood at your memorial. I gave your mother the flag." "I know," Cho said, and his voice cracked on the second word. "I'm sorry, Mara. I couldn't come back. Not the way things were." "What does that mean? Talk to me. Why do you have a directed energy weapon pointed at a civilian airport?" "Because it's the only way anyone was ever going to listen." His breathing was ragged, uneven, and underneath it Mara could hear something mechanical, a ventilator, maybe, or life support equipment. Wherever he wasn't well. "Pull up the diagnostic log on Vantage 9's targeting core, Mara. Ask your friends in that room to check the software build date." Mara looked to Farrow, who nodded to a technician. Screens flickered. A build number appeared, followed by a string of code, followed by a modification log that made the color drain from 3 separate faces in the room. "That's not the certified flight software," a young analyst said, staring at his screen like it had betrayed him personally. "This is a shadow build. It's not in any of our records." "Because it was never supposed to see daylight," Cho said. 18 months ago, before the Aleutians, I found a targeting patch buried inside Vantage 9's code, one that let the platform fire without the 2-officer authorization protocol, without a human confirmation, fully autonomous. Someone built a backdoor into a weapon capable of vaporizing a city block, Mara, and they built it so quietly that even the program's own oversight committee never saw it. "Who?" "General Aldrich Reyes." The name landed in the room like a dropped weight. Mara knew that name. Everyone in that room knew that name. Reyes had chaired the program's steering committee for 6 years. Reyes had signed off on every certification, every safety review, every congressional briefing that swore Vantage 9 could never fire without full human authorization. "I found the backdoor and I reported it," Cho continued. "Through channels, the way you're supposed to. 2 days later my aircraft went down over the Aleutians in weather that shouldn't have grounded a training flight, let alone killed an experienced crew. I didn't crash, Mara. I was shot down by a weapon that wasn't supposed to be able to fire on its own, the same weapon sitting in orbit right now." "You're saying Reyes used Vantage 9 to kill you?" "I'm saying I've spent 18 months proving it, from inside a fishing trawler crew that pulled me out of the water half dead and asked no questions, because that's who I had left to trust. I have the original flight logs. I have the unauthorized firing order with Reyes's own digital signature on it. And for 18 months, every time I tried to get that evidence to anyone with the clearance to act on it, the transmission got buried, deleted, or the person I sent it to had a very convenient accident within a week." Farrow's face had gone pale. Around the room, operators were exchanging glances that said they were beginning, horribly, to believe him. So today, Cho said, I finally got access to the one system with the reach to get the truth out before anyone could bury it again. I'm not going to fire on that airport, Mara. I was never going to fire on that airport. I needed a threat large enough that nobody could look away from it, and I needed the one person left in this program I still trust to be standing in the room when the truth came out. Because the second I release this data, General Reyes is going to try to have this platform's weapon fired on my location to erase the evidence, and I need someone at that console who won't let that order go through. As if summoned by the words themselves, a side door of the operations center slammed open. General Aldrich Reyes strode in, four stars on his shoulder, flanked by two aides, his face a mask of controlled fury. Colonel Farrow, I am assuming direct command of this facility. Get that officer off my headset and prep a targeting solution on the hostile signal's point of origin. That's a lawful order. The room froze. Every operator's hand hovered over their console, unsure whose command to follow. Mara pulled the headset microphone close and kept her voice level. Eli, send the package. Now. Belay that, Reyes barked. Voss, you are not in this chain of command. Colonel Farrow, execute the firing solution or I will have you relieved within the hour. Farrow didn't move. She looked at Reyes, then at Mara, then at the screen where Cho's diagnostic data was still scrolling, a modification log with his signature, time-stamped 18 months before his supposed death. Sir, Farrow said, her voice shaking but her spine straight, with respect, I'd like to see that firing order in writing before I execute a strike on an American citizen's location based on a verbal command from an officer who has not explained why his digital signature is on an unauthorized weapons patch. Reyes's face went the color of old brick. That is a fabrication. That signature can be forged by anyone with mid-level system access. Then you won't mind, Mara said quietly, still on the open channel, if we let the Department of Justice figure out which one of you is telling the truth. Eli, how long do you need? 90 seconds, Cho said. His voice was fading, thinner than it had been a minute ago. The relay's routing through a commercial satellite uplink. It's slow, but it's clean. Nobody can pull it back once it starts. Do it. Belay that transmission, Reyes shouted, lunging toward the nearest console. One of the operators physically blocked him, hands up, refusing to move. This is treason. Every person in this room who does not comply is committing treason against. General, Farrow said, and something in her voice made even Reyes stop. I've served this program for 11 years. I have never once seen you argue this hard to shoot down a threat before confirming who the enemy actually is. I think, respectfully, sir, you should stand down while we sort this out. On the screen, a progress bar crawled forward. Upload, 20%. 35%. Reyes's eyes darted around the room, doing the math a cornered man does. How many people here would still follow him, how many wouldn't, how fast this was slipping away. He made a decision Mara would replay in her mind for years afterward. He bolted for the door. He didn't make it. Two security personnel, alerted by a call Farrow had made the second Cho's name hit the air, intercepted him in the corridor outside. Upload, 60%. 75%. Eli, talk to me, Mara said. Stay with me. I'm here, Cho said, but his voice had gone soft, distant, the way voices do at the edge of something. I'm not going to make it much further than this, Mara. Whatever they did to keep me quiet for 18 months, it took more out of me than I let on. Don't you dare, Mara said, and her voice broke for the first time since the terminal. Don't you dare do this and then not stay to see it land. Upload, 95%. 100%. Transmission complete. A cheer, small and disbelieving, went up from one corner of the operations center as 3 different open-source news feeds and 2 Federal Inspector General inboxes lit up simultaneously with an encrypted data package that would, within the hour, become the lead story on every network in the country. "It's done," Mara said softly. "It's out, Eli. Nobody can bury it now." "Good," Cho whispered. "Good. Tell my sister I wasn't a coward. Tell her I just needed to find someone I could trust with it." "Tell her yourself," Mara said. "Where are you?" "I'm coming to get you." There was a long pause, filled only with the faint mechanical hiss of a ventilator, and then, so quiet she almost missed it. "Clear skies, Reaper." The line went dead. Vantage 9's weapon powered down 40 minutes later, its targeting lock released the moment a properly authorized two-officer command sequence finally reached the platform, Pharaoh on one console, a newly arrived 4-star Inspector General on the other. General Reyes was in federal custody before sunset, his digital signature matched against the shadow build modification log by 3 independent forensic teams before midnight. The unauthorized firing order from 18 months prior, the one that had sent an EA-18G Growler crashing into the Aleutian Sea and let the Pentagon bury a good officer's death as an accident, was entered into evidence the following week. They found Cho 4 hours later, in a rented storage unit outside Colorado Springs that had been serving as a jury-rigged command post for a man running on borrowed time and second-hand medical supplies. He was alive, barely, kept breathing by a stubbornness Mara had always suspected ran deeper in him than in anyone else she'd ever flown with. It would be another 2 days before doctors would let her sit at his bedside, and when she finally did, he opened his eyes and managed something that was almost a smile. "You look terrible," he rasped. "You look worse," she said, and meant it as the kindest thing she'd said to anyone in years. Mara Voss went back to Boulder eventually, back to the condos and the Honda and the ordinary rhythm of a life she'd tried, for 3 years, to convince herself was enough. But something in her had shifted, the way it always does when the thing you buried turns out to still be breathing. She kept her old credentials in a drawer she no longer pretended not to open. She answered a call from Colonel Pharaoh 2 months later without hesitation, and another one after that. Nobody in the food court at Denver International ever learned who the woman in the faded jacket had been, or how close their ordinary afternoon had come to becoming a headline. The screens went back to scrolling flight times within the hour. The paperback she dropped was found by a janitor and placed, unclaimed, in the airport's lost and found, where it sat for 6 weeks before someone finally threw it away. But somewhere above the clouds, in files that would take federal investigators years to fully untangle, there was a record of a woman who had once again answered to a name she tried to leave behind, because some names, once given to you, never really let go. Reaper. She'd spent 3 years pretending she wasn't listening for it. She was glad, in the end, that some part of her never stopped.